Thanks for coming to the first of the three-part series. I'm going to start up here, partly with Sam here. Sam, today is a day where you could try the hearing loop. So we have a new system around the synagogue that if you have a hearing aid and you switch it to T setting on your hearing aid, it'll broadcast directly to your hearing aid. And I'll probably come off the beam in just a second, but let's get it started. Some of what we're going to do today, this three-part series is shloshah Devarim, which is one of the famous statements from the Mishnah, on three things the world rests. Shloshah Devarim, al ha-Torah, v'al ha-avodah, v'al gimilut chasadim. So three things on which the world rests: on Torah, on avodah, which is a somewhat complicated word, let's just say on service, sometimes translated on worship. But let's say on worship or service, we'll talk about that next time. And the third one on acts of righteousness, on acts of kindness, acts of love. So we'll focus on ethics for the third section. But today is God and Torah. And some of the texts we may look at may be ones that you've seen before, maybe many times, or ideas you've had before. But I tell you, there's no way you've seen these texts more than I have, because they're my favorite texts. And for me, like I said in my email last night, I'm really into the idea of Judaism 101. If you do it right, it's kind of all you need. But we don't do Judaism 101 right at all, for the most part. And so sometimes we end up doing advanced Judaism, sort of we'll look at a particular biography of a particular person, and it can be very interesting. But we haven't really talked about some of the big issues about how the rabbis understand and how maybe we understand some of the main things of what we're already doing. So for today, some ideas of God and Torah and Revelation. For next time, the services, avodah, and the holidays. Because I'm one of those guys who feels like the way kids experience holidays isn't necessarily the way Moses Maimonides experienced the holiday. Like, Moses Maimonides wasn't just saying, yeah, I want to make my own brother. I hope that the great rabbis of our tradition had something to grow into. And so that'll be next time. And then the third section will be on Jewish ethics, and what does it mean that we have a Talmud, and what does it mean that we have Jewish law, and how does it work, and what are some of the big things it's talking about. So we'll start off with God and the Torah. And I won't give you a comprehensive analysis of every perspective that's ever been there, but I'm going to read from the very beginning of the Torah, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. So the very beginning of the Torah says, Reshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In Reshit, in the beginning, let's just say, God created the heavens and the earth. So, question pops up, which is, a number of questions pop up right away, which is, what is God, what is the beginning, and what is this book that this is the first line of? If you go to the rabbinic commentaries of our sages, our Talmudic sages, and you look at the very first midrash, the very first interpretation, commentary, explanation of this line, this is what you will get. You will get Rabbi Oshia's, and just quickly say this, so we'll quickly review. The period of the Torah largely covers, let's say, the beginning of creation, but very, very quickly jumps to Abraham around the year 1500, 1400 BCE. And then it covers the development of the tribe of the Hebrews, roughly the time of the patriarchs, 1450, 1500, until we end up, maybe 1400, until we end up in Egypt around 1300 BCE, and then the Exodus from Egypt around 1200 BCE, and then the period of settling the land, which is now Israel, which is the period between 1100 or 1125 and 1025 BCE, and then the beginning of our kingdom with King Saul in approximately 1025 BCE, and King David in 1000 BCE. And then we have the period of having a country, off and on for roughly 1,000 years, and then the country is destroyed. We no longer have worship, avodah as it was understood, sacrifice, a priesthood, a temple to go to. And the rabbis, and they're different people, they're different groups that are vying for leadership. And I want to roughly run through them really quickly. It's the quick view, but sometimes when I look at the paper today, I mean, you could probably do the quick view of what's going on in American politics. It's like this group, that group, that group, and yeah, there's some subtleties, but not as many as I wish. So you basically have the people that say, you don't have a country, you don't have a country. Right? If America is destroyed and it's taken over by the Soviet Union, there's no more America. You don't kind of say, well, let's go be American in Sweden. Right? That kind of doesn't work. You become Swedish, you become Soviet, wherever you go. You can hate it, but in 2 generations, your grandkids won't know the difference. So there's one group that says, we don't have a country, we don't have, like there is no Judaism. There's just being an Israelite. And without Israel, there are no Israelites. And they form a group mostly called the Zealots. And they conduct an insurrection against the Romans. So their attitude is, unless we take back our capital, unless we take back our land, then that's the only future we would have. Unfortunately, they're consistently killed and massacred, and the Romans have a tendency to punish 1,000 to 10,000 civilians, slaughter them for every attack by an insurgency. So you have the Zealots, you have people politically trying to take back the country. You have a group called the Sadducees, who are largely from the priesthood. And they have an idea that maybe we could convince the Romans to let us keep the temple going. So even if there's no country, we're part of Rome, if we got the temple going, we can do the sacrifices. So there's no king, we get that. There's no king, there's a Roman emperor. So the king part goes away, the political part goes away, but we got the temple going and sacrifice. And that's what they're about, the Sadducees. You have a group that hates the Sadducees, but has some similar ideas, called the Essenes, and they are a utopian, practically a cult. They're a cult that largely has its base around the Dead Sea, near Masada, and their idea is that the world's kind of coming to an end, because if God lets God's own home on earth be ransacked by the Romans, and God lets his chosen king be replaced, and God lets the world around us, the Romans basically, like the Nazis, taking over, then this is a sign it's the end times, and that they copy, even though they hate the priesthood in Jerusalem, they hate the Sadducees because they feel that it was their corruption. Even the idea of working with the Romans. It's their corruption that's at fault. They view themselves as the true priesthood, the Essenes. They go in the mikveh 10, 20, 30 times a day. They want to be completely pure and ready for maybe the final war of angels who are going to arrive. They're like a cult that believes all of this is about to get swept up into something beyond some kind of end times thing, and they're going to be the ones who are pure and ready to go, and either they'll be swept up with the angels, or in some ways they'll be taking over the temple. It's unclear. And so they die out. Among other things, they don't have sex because they have to be in a state of purity. That is obviously not great for the next generation, conducive to lasting over generations. And they go away. And so you have some of those groups, and then you have the groups that become what we call the rabbis. Sometimes they're referred to the Pharisees. And we forget what they did. And what they did is going to be very important for what God in the Torah is, because they redefine it. So the first thing they do is they basically make a deal with the Romans. And I'm simplifying, but it's largely true. And so for those who've heard this before, I apologize. And for those who may someday go to conversion with me or anything like this, this is Jewish history on one foot. And it's, I'll give you the other foot another time. The other foot's the New Testament. So they basically have this thing. They say, you got these Romans around, the Roman legion. They hate it here. It's hot, it's humid. I mean, even 2,000 years later, Mark Twain went to the Holy Land, and at the end of the 1800s. And he came back, and he famously wrote Samuel Clemens about the Holy Land. I went there, and there was nothing there. It was just like a bunch of gravel and dust. I mean, a lot of what we know as Israel today wasn't even there in 1910, 1920. I mean, so that the Romans get there. It's hot, it's dusty, and the locals hate them. It's not like the Romans brought a whole team of nation builders. They were the army. There was a legion there. They were soldiers. And they didn't really necessarily want to be there. And so the rabbis basically had an idea, which is, what if we conceded to them criminal law? And we asked them if we could take over civil law. We have the exact same distinction in America today, right? So it's like one, they're looking at the Romans, the Roman praetors and members of the military. They sit there in the towns and places, and people bring them, they're like, look, you have to help me. That guy David, he totally ripped me off. I gave him a deposit on the apartment, and then he told me I ripped up the carpet, and you got to do it. You got to make him pay. And Judy there is the Roman, and she's sitting there, and she's like, just shoot me now. I'm going crazy, right? But that's if you take over a country and you're the law, right? I mean, someone's got to do this. Otherwise, the people are just going to riot. They're like, fine, you came over and took over my village and demanding my taxes. You got to get my deposit back for me. And so they made this idea. What if we're the Judge Judys of the world? We say we'll handle all the civil disputes. We'll handle marriage and divorce, property disputes, anything that would fall in a civil court. We'll handle. But, of course, you're the Romans, you're the conquerors. Anything that is criminal law, right, the state versus, Nadav Cain, because, theft, murder, anything that breaks those laws, the laws of Rome, whatever it is, stay away. The military picks the person up, we won't say anything about it, we have no jurisdiction. And this largely is the origin of that they won. All the other groups didn't have a future. And this idea, and so what was behind the idea that we'll take over civil law was the kernel of a very profound idea. Judaism can continue to exist in the absence of a country as long as you follow Jewish civil law. And they published something called the Mishnah, which is basically, as I do in our Hebrew school, I have a lesson when you get to 6th and 7th grade, where I basically say, there's no more America somehow, and we're all going to start a new America in Egypt or Sweden or Iceland or Antarctica. And I want you to write a Mishnah of what you would do to be an American in the Antarctic in the 22nd century if there's no America anymore. And I have them write out the American holidays. Thanksgiving, 4th of July. What do you do on 4th of July? You have fireworks and you barbecue and you do the national anthem. What do you do at Thanksgiving? And I have the kids write all this stuff out. And then I say, well, how do you get married? Well, right? How does it look? What do you say? Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join in holy matrimony. Okay, let's write a little bit of that out. How do you get divorced? Okay, hopefully we don't focus on that in the Hebrew school. But look, there's a way to do it. And so, what other kind of civil things? How do people get along? Properties, how do you solve things? You go to a judge, and you have small claims court, and blah, blah, blah. That's the Mishnah. You look at it, there's marriage section, there's divorce section, there's the holidays. It's portable Judaism. You can keep Jewish ethics, you can keep Jewish holidays, you can keep kashrut, you can keep going to the mikveh, you can keep ways you convert, and the rabbis establish a portable Judaism. It basically works out with the Romans, although it's a very contentious and tested relationship, as it is working with the tyrants. But that exists today. And it's fabulous. It also has an idea that they largely adopt from the Greeks, which is an amazing thing. They largely adopt the idea that, well, who's in charge? If we don't have a king anymore, and it's not passed down by, King Solomon is King David's son, it's not passed down that way, and we don't have priesthood anymore, which is it's passed down through family and lineage, and are you a Kohen, are you a Levi, then what are we going to do? And amazingly, they adopt it from the best of Hellenistic practice, which is crazy. They're adopting it from the best of what's in their enemy, which is Greek schools of philosophy. That a great sage like Aristotle, Hippocrates, Heraclitus, Socrates, a great sage opens a school. And they train people to think and live and practice the tradition according to the way they understand it. And they train people in the law, but also in how to think and how to live. And you have to start off with the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai. And then you have the school, and they each have academies. And they train students and disciples, kind of guru to disciple, on how to think and how to administer. And then they send them out into towns. Where they play Judge Judy. Is the chicken kosher? He decides, right? I guess there were no Judge Judys at the time. There should have been. It would be Judge Shlomo or something. And Judge Shlomo says, well, I think the chicken's not kosher because it's got a big wart right there. And then you've got someone from a different academy in a different town saying, warts don't count. And so you have these academies of wisdom and really very, very intellectual, very high level training students. And then you have an issue which is sometimes they have differences, right? Hillel's training the students in one way, Shammai in another, chicken's kosher, the chicken's not kosher, and then you get the development of Jewish law, which is they have public debates between the senior people in the academies. As I pointed out in my writings to the congregation before, there is a prohibition on students debating students from other academies. You have to have the leaders of the academies do it, because the leaders of the academy, according to the Mishnah, maybe it's an ideal, is that they're the only ones who understand that they're doing it for higher purposes. That when you have let's say, think of the Republicans and Democrats thing. That when you have a debate, is the debate that you are evil and wrong because you say something different about God or about the Torah or about how to be Jewish? Or is it that when we debate, if Hillel says you can do a conversion in 2 hours, because Naomi turns to Ruth in the book of Ruth and says, I will not let you spend even a single night without being a part of our people. So Hillel says, do a conversion in afternoon before nightfall. And Shammai says, no, you got to study for years, and you got to do the calendar, and you got to do all of it, and you should still not be allowed to convert because you don't understand it's persecution, and you go to heaven without it. Rather than say, you have destroyed Judaism by converting people in a day, or you have destroyed Judaism by making it so hard for people to convert, only the leaders of the academies understand that this is like Aristotle debating Plato. That this is like, look, we're really on the same page. And we're having a bit of an intellectual debate, and we believe in our positions. But we understand that we're both Jews, and we're both here, and we're both trying to live this right. And to an extent, they let a lot of variation go. And when things can't allow for variation, you just have to have more uniformity, they take a kind of Supreme Court Sanhedrin vote. And so some of the leaders of the academies will take a vote. But I always found that very interesting, because they said when the students would debate each other, they always made it personal. Like, you call yourself a Jew, and you students of Hillel, you're doing it wrong. And you know what? Wait until you get smicha to do that. You have to be told that you're now a professor or you're now a rabbi before you get to do that. So now back to the rabbis and the Torah. So what do they say about the Torah? Okay, this is your portable Judaism. It's the book in the closet. And you don't need anything else. You don't need the menorah, you don't need the priesthood, you don't need the king, and you're going to take this everywhere you go. And it is the greatest Dear John letter ever written. And it really, I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, well, I guess there are plenty of other ways to put it, but yeah, the temple was destroyed. Our country was destroyed. I mean, it's pretty bleak. Is it the end? Well, it is like Elvis has left the building. God has left the building. So where is God now? If we had a temple, we had a country, and now you're telling me we're going to be sitting here in Babylonia in a town, or we're going to be in Egypt in a town, or we're going to be we're going to be in Istanbul, and we're going to gather in a room with a closet, and well, where's God? You're telling me where's God in that? And the idea is that God wrote you a letter. And all the answers you want in life, they're in there. They really are in there. That doesn't make any sense, right? That book was written thousands of years ago. Let's say 1,500 years ago, 1,200 at their time, now 3,000 years ago for our time. How can it know what I'm going through in my marriage? How can it know what I'm going through with my grandkids? I mean, how can it know what I'm going through with my job or my health? And they basically answer that God's in the text. That God's energy moved from a building into the words. And that every word of this text was meant to be there. Now, if you're Orthodox, you might well say that it was written by Moses' hand on Mount Sinai, and that's how we justify that every word here was meant to be together. If you're a conservative or reform, you say, well, the Torah is not so explicit about that. What Moses wrote at the top of Mount Sinai, is it just the Ten Commandments? Is it another chapter of social laws and mishpatim? What does the word Torah even mean? It's not exactly clear. But what we do all agree on is that all of this was meant to be. It was meant to be together. And if you read it, it can shine meanings in all directions. It transcends time. And it can speak to you. So now we get to the very beginning line. When God began to create heaven and earth, or in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So when the rabbis say, let us publish a volume of the way to read Torah, They start with Rabbi Hoshaya, one of the great early rabbis, early Pharisees, and he says this: the word Reshit is a strange word. The Torah should have started, if it wanted to say in the beginning, it should have said Barishonah, which is in the beginning. But Reshit means, it could mean in the beginning of. So you have an of hanging there. In the beginning of, God created the heavens and the earth. So you can either mess around with the word of and try to figure out what that meant. You could say, in the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth. And there are hundreds of midrashim that go in different directions. But Rabbi Hoshaya, what does he say? The word Reshit also appears in Proverbs, where it's a reference to the Torah. The Torah is Reshit Darko. It's the beginning of the way. The beginning of the way to go into your future, to know how to live. It's the beginning of the way that you're seeking. So if you're seeking a way and you look in the Torah, it's the beginning of that way. So it's a reference to the Torah. So since ba can also mean using, like using a tool or through, the first line means with the Torah, using the Torah, God created the universe. So why is this the very first midrash in Reshit Rabbah, in the collected midrashim, Midrash Rabbah? The Torah is not just a book. For sake of argument, let's distinguish between Torah with a capital T and Torah with a little t. Of course, there are no capital letters in Hebrew, but let's just do that for English. Let's say Torah with a little t is the Chumash. It's the book. That's Torah with a little t. It's the actual words on a page, on a parchment. But God didn't create the universe with this. God didn't just go like, here, make universe, here, electrons, neutrons, right? So there's another Torah we're talking about, capital T. And Rabbi Hoshaya says, what is that Torah? It's what the Greeks call logos. It actually, again, takes sort of the apex of Greek philosophy. Logos, where we get, all these words, psychology, Scientology, which is not anything to do with logos. Any word that ends in L-O-G-Y, which means logical structure. They say the real Torah is this. There's an underlying order to the universe. It's what the Greeks said. It's what anyone who does scientific experiments believes. There's an underlying order to the universe. That's Torah. That's capital T Torah. So with a blueprint, he says, with a blueprint of the universe, God created the universe. With the structure of the universe in mind, God created the universe. And therefore, when we interact with this lowercase t Torah, it gets revealed to us, if we do it right and we do it with our whole heart and soul and mind, what that underlying structure is. So let's say, clearly science is included. So if you're trying to figure out what is this underlying mathematical and chemistry and physics of the universe, you are learning Torah. Because you're coming to understand the underlying order of the universe. What we sometimes also forget is that we're not limited to the material sciences. And this is where, and now I'm probably getting to a point where you're like, I followed everything so far, it makes sense, but I'm going to now give you a clunker into the future. And you may not agree. I actually believe in something called natural law. I'm like the Pope on that one, I think. I believe that I pick up books on parenting. Not because I think that exact person who wrote this book on parenting is the mumcha, is the expert of all time, but because I actually think there are better and worse ways of parenting. I think there's an underlying order of parenting. I think there's a way you can spoil your kids. I think there's a way you can be too hard on your kids. I think there's a way to talk to your kids. Let's give you an example. A scientific study, I actually think came out of Israel, I'm not sure. I read a lot of the Israeli press releases. About 2 years ago was that if you don't have your child clean up their room by the time they're 4 years old, in all probability they will never clean up their room. Because they're actual windows. In other words, there are developmental windows of the brain. As you probably know, at the age of 2 and 3, children learn a new word every 4 hours. They're capable. So if you talk to them in baby talk, or just play them cartoons, and you don't parent them and talk to them in big words, they struggle later with reading. So in other words, this is a real underlying order of the universe. So if someone said, well, Rabbi, I believe in science but not in religion, like science is just molecules and electrons, and everything else is open to interpretation. Well, I don't think parenting is just open to interpretation. I think there are some hard facts. I think that you try to work with those. Does it mean we get it perfect? No, but there's a wisdom of it. And that's why Rabbi Oshaya says, if you ask me what is the Hebrew word for the Greek word logos, it is chokhmah, which is, for those who know Hebrew, they know it's a word usually translated wisdom. But it's more than just wisdom, artsy-fartsy wisdom. It's a wisdom that's grounded in knowledge and facts. But it can vary. You can go to two rabbis for two different opinions, and one person, they use their chokhmah and they see it a little differently. Right? You go to one psychologist uses behavioral therapy, another is cognitive, and another is Freudian. It doesn't mean one's wrong and one's right, but they each have their own chokhmas that they're using, a wisdom built around some substance and try to help you. So I think that part of the gay marriage or same-sex marriage decision was an understanding that we thought there was an order to marriage. And now we understand, just like we changed from Newtonian physics to something else, we used to think the earth was flat, now we know it's not. We realize, you know something? No. The underlying Torah of marriage is not just heterosexual. You know, and so like what we've come to see is that there's a natural order. There's an underlying order. And two souls can be in partnership and in love. They don't have to be of the same sex. I mean, they don't have to be of different sexes. And now in the LGBT community, we're also trying to understand also even the way what gender is. And in a way that's not, well, it's just open to interpretation. It's kind of a scientific thing about, well, where did this word gender come from? How do we understand it? So we're trying to get wiser about gender. And so what Torah is it's trying to help you with your life because it's trying to show you what's underneath the surface. That's really what Torah is. So if someone says to me, why did Jews make good scientists? Or something like that, I say to them, because if you go to our Hebrew school or you go to yeshiva, what you're taught is, okay, everybody, I want to show you the first line of the Torah, and now let's come up with 30 different interpretations. I mean, and there are more than 30. I mean, Rivka's here. I mean, you know, there are hundreds just of that word, and they're all good. Well, that really helps. So if Stephanie comes to Hebrew school, and then she goes off into the world, and let's say she becomes an entomologist. I'm like, well, you know what? I want you to go and look at mosquito in 100 different ways. Chances are she's going to come up maybe with a new way of understanding mosquitoes rather than, well, I read in the book it said mosquitoes operate this way. She might come up with the fact that all along we've thought mosquitoes do it this way, but actually they do it this other way. I had a friend who died at a very tender age, and she was a brilliant biologist. And she used to just, when we were at Princeton, she used to just like go out into the woods. And I remember once, she discovered a whole new symbiotic system. She literally discovered an insect. She watched an insect in a tree, and she figured out that they must be working in harmony. And she told her, you know, she was off the charts. She told her biology professor, he published it. Like, that's Torah. You know, that's like, I can look at this tree and see it in a new way. And in a way that actually tells me about the underlying order of how things work. Okay, so that's what a little bit of what the Torah is. Is that it is it's little t Torah, it's words on a page that have come together in such a way that it's a message from God. God's in those words, and you can use those words to start seeing the world and yourself in a larger way that gets you to the deeper structure underneath. And one of the things the rabbis say is that that you have to bring all of yourself to this. You got to bring your heart, and you got to bring all of your heart, all of your mind, and all of your mo'od, which is a complicated word, but all of the stuff you don't think even is a part of it. That's mo'od. Mo'od is the word for very in Hebrew. So it's like, if you think, well, Torah study, I'm supposed to sit there and say, well, you know, I'm going to be very pious and Puritan when I'm doing this, then you're leaving all this mo'od, all this other extra stuff that you think doesn't belong. Bring that stuff too. You got to bring everything, all of it. Anything that's in your life, you got to bring. And don't go up to it and say, well, I quit Hebrew school because, I just think the fact that we all came from Adam and Eve, I believe in evolution, it's silly. You didn't bring everything to that Torah study. right? If you had brought all of your scientific beliefs and everything to that Torah study, maybe you would have ended up thinking, as some of our rabbis did, that maybe the word Adam wasn't a person who looked like Frankenstein, right? Or a clay creature. Maybe Adam was the very first cell. The very first, I always get the, eukaryocyte, or the very first, I used to call it paramecium, but that's the wrong word. Very first amoeba. We all have a common ancestor in a single cell, and maybe that's what the Torah is talking about. So the person who said, well, you're not supposed to bring in what I learned in science class, that was their ma'od. They're like, I'm here with my full mind and my full heart. You're not. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like you go to one Torah study and you're like, I know exactly what to do about my complicated job situation. It may take time. It's a spiritual practice, right? If you can go to one introductory yoga session and be like, no, I achieved enlightenment. God bless you. But the rest of us, it doesn't work that way. So I want to pass something out, and we'll go to a text. I hope I have enough. If not, I'll ask someone to share. For anyone who wants, I made 4 copies of the part I did on the Pharisees and on what it means. Basically that.
Oh, no.
What?
It's okay.
Oh, no?
No, I'm sorry. I thought they were the same thing, but they're not.
Oh, it's okay. I get everything mixed up. I never follow the mitzvah of keeping things separate in their categories. I'm terrible about mixing.
My bad.
So when the rabbis say the world's founded on 3 things, all the ethical stuff, all the mitzvah stuff that's ethical, the kindness, the behavior, gimilut chasadim, and it's built on avodah, prayer, services, holidays, that ritual, all the ritual structure. But it's also built on Torah. They mean Torah with a capital T, and they basically introduced reading as our main spiritual exercise. If the Torah, in a way, is like the best Dear John letter ever written, if the Torah is God's presence went into the letters, then reading is one of the 3 pillars of the universe. Judaism, I don't have to tell you, Jews have always practiced, in my understanding, and I'm not trying to be jingoistic, is that Jews have been the most literate people for thousands of years, trained people to read at young ages. The Jews were there in medieval Europe. People think, well, where did anti-Semitism come from? Just the jealousy alone, that most even nobles and landowners in medieval Europe couldn't read. And yet, 12-year-old Jewish girls could. I can only imagine the resentment, the nastiness that went on. They introduced reading as a brand new way, in a way, of connecting with God. So that's what we're doing today. And so one of the things that comes up is this. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the rabbis say, some of you have done this with me before, so I'm going to do it really fast. What does God create on the first day? Let there be light. So first day is just order. No, I thank you. Don't be embarrassed. So you thought it was going to be a harder question. Light. And then in Hebrew, or, aleph, vav, resh. On the fourth day, God creates me'orot, right? Same word in the middle, aleph, vav, resh, starts with an M, ends with a T. The mem makes it a noun, basically, although word is a noun, and the T makes it a plural. So what God makes on the fourth day are the light makers, me'orot, light makers. This is where we got to get beyond thinking in terms of King James translation Sunday school, right? If you read the Bible in simple English translation, you're fine with Eitz Chaim as long as you read the notes. Because you should see the note on just that first page, because the note itself goes on for 3 pages, including a lot of what I talk about. Don't think of it, God created light, and then God created the stars, and the sun, and the moon on the fourth day. Think of it in Hebrew, God created or, and then God created things that make or. So the rabbi said, if God created the things that make light on the fourth day, what is the light on the first day? And their basic idea is that starting at the very beginning, if you can work out that puzzle, you're going to have a lot of insight into what the Torah is and what God is. And one of the answers, actually, in some ways the primary answer they give, is that, let's do it in English. In English, you can use the word light. Maybe I'll try to do that. I'll start with light since we all know that word. God created a kind of light that we never experience directly. And they called it divine light. Let's call it God light. So the first step of the formation of the universe was God light. And since or in Hebrew can also mean energy, for many of the rabbis, let's just now switch to that. It all started with God energy. There was nothing but God energy. And then, what God made on the fourth day are what we know as things that made light. Stars, our sun, right? So they said, well, let's think about this. Well then, okay, so day 4 is about the creation of what we look around. They weren't so stupid 2,000 years ago. The cosmos. Day 4 is the cosmos forming. But a whole lot of time before that, there must have been just nothing but divine energy. And they come up with this idea, which is, by the way, the second thing they say is, we judge time. Humans judge a day by the earth and the sun. But if the earth and the sun weren't even there, then we don't know what a day is in Genesis. And I can't even talk about this at Grossmont College. And when I just did that, I saw so many faces fall. Because I had a bunch of evangelicals and Catholics, and right there, they were like, we don't trust this guy. No, really, they were really like, I could see it. I had about 200 people. And I was like, oh no. And so I held my ground. There's a difference between a God day and a human day. And so they're looking at me like, wait, because I didn't realize, I didn't know if they were going to be all secular or religious. I didn't know Grossmont College. You're telling me that when the Torah says 6 days, it doesn't mean 6 days. I said, well, I'll just be like the rabbis. Look at the Psalms. If you believe in the Bible, look at the Psalms. It says 1,000 years could be but a day to God, because God is so eternal. So it doesn't mean, okay, now I know the formula is 1,000 to 1. What it means is we don't know what a God day is. Okay, going back to what they say. The first thing that happens is there's an infinity of energy. And it's a God energy. And we don't know that, we never experience that energy directly today. We don't get to see it. Because visual energy, detectable energy like that, we're talking about on the fourth day. So it's some kind of energy we don't understand. It's a God energy. It permeates everything. It's infinite because God is infinite. And then somehow in whatever period of these God days mean, the cosmos that we look up in the sky at night and see, our planet, forms out of that. So then they say, what is the Torah? What are we talking about? The underlying structure of the universe? It's the underlying structure of that energy. It's the way those energies interact. How, it's like math. I mean, there are laws about it in a sense. We just don't know what all those laws are, but you'll get to a wisdom of them if you live a life of mitzvot and you interact with Torah study. If you do, give me Lut Chasadim, Avodah, and Torah. And so that The universe is not what it seems. There's something it's all made up of. And what it's all made up of is God. Because they said for us to know the difference, and we can do a whole lesson on that someday. Is there a difference between the God energy and God? Yes. But they said for most practical purposes, it's not going to affect your daily life. What the difference is between God separate from the energy and God of the energy. And one of the ways they talk about that is God in and of God's self. And so some of you have heard this before, and I'll tell you this. If you wanted to study Kabbalah, if you wanted to study what was the theology of most of the rabbis, but it was not written down, it was passed on orally, you would have to basically establish a guru-master relationship, because Kabbalah was only taught orally, and there were very few texts of it until the publication of a lot of works and writing them down in Sfat, basically the 15th, 16th centuries. So until then, you had to get a master-disciple relationship. The greatest of the Kabbalists is my password for my Wi-Fi, so now you can get on my Wi-Fi anytime you want, was what many people, what Moshe Gittel, the great scholar of Kabbalah, says was probably the greatest Kabbalist of all time, the teacher of the Ari, was Moshe Cordovero. And Cordovero had a system, and it was this. If Joan came to me, and Joan said, Rabbi, I want to learn Kabbalah, and you're one of my rabbinical students, or you're a rabbi, probably already be a rabbi. So Rabbi Joan comes to me and says, I want to learn Kabbalah. And let's say in those days there was a rule that you had to be 40, and you had to be male, and you had to be married. Because the idea was otherwise you would spend all your time thinking all these big thoughts, and you would forget the other two sides of it. You would do Torah, and you would forget Gemilut Chasadim and Avodah. So because you'd be like, I just want to do Torah all day long. If you ever read the Talmud, there are a ton of debates going on among the rabbis where the bell, basically the church bell sounds. Someone says, rabbis, we're going to be late for davening mincha, we're going to be late for services. Now, there are even stories about Yom Kippur. Yom Kol Nidre is about to be sung, and the rabbis don't want to leave the Beit Midrash. They love studying Torah. And some of them stay, and it's really an issue. So in other words, it's a temptation to just want to do this stuff and not do the rest of Judaism. So they say, yeah. But if Joe comes to me, I'd say, Cordovero had a system. I'm exaggerating it a teeny bit to make a point. He'd say, okay, Joan, for a year, everything you do where you see the word God, blessed, every bracha, every blessing, every prayer, substitute the word God for Ein Sof, for the word infinity. And then come back to me and see if you can do it. So every, blessed are you, infinity. Infinity, will you bless my kids? Infinity, may I have this, may I have this dance? May I have this good harvest coming up? Don't be like infinity, forgive me my sins. Forgive me my sins. Can you, be in the sukkah and be like, it makes me feel like I feel the presence of infinity with me. Can you do that? And if you can't do that, forget I ever told you that and go away. So that one of the things they say is that if you want to talk about the difference between the energies that are underlying the reality we live in and their Torah, their order, the way things work, and you want to get to, I want to get back to the God of God's self, then practice with the word infinity and see if you can do it. So there's a difference between infinity and our universe, but they say for all intents and purposes, you can focus on the idea of an underlying structure of the universe. And so one of their main ways of understanding this is if there was nothing but like a flash of divine energy that was infinitely large, that was infinite, and then somehow the cosmos came out of that by the fourth day, and then we ourselves, then Genesis is an exact, the Torah that's within the Torah is the following. And let's have someone read. So will someone read the myth that was written down? This was an orally passed on myth. There's a debate about how many of the rabbis were Kabbalistic. It is always getting revised upward. So it used to be, Kabbalah was this boutique little movement among a couple of rabbis who lived in Israel and Spain. And scholars are constantly revising that. Basically what we understand is that for many of the sages, both in the Talmud and certainly by the medieval period, Kabbalah was kind of like their theology. It was the rabbis' theology they didn't share on Saturday morning. Rabbis weren't like they are today. The rabbis didn't get the sermons so much, and the rabbis sat in the back like a fiddler on the roof, and no one paid attention to him. Sort of like me, except I'm up here. So the rabbis were like, we're studying Maimonides. We're studying Ramban, who was a Kabbalist. When we do serious Torah study, we're getting to a very high level of the abstraction, but you don't go in and tell the kids that in Hebrew school. So the idea now is that Kabbalah, in its various forms, it's sort of like saying yoga. There are different kinds, there are different approaches, there are different structures. But more or less, we're talking about most of the rabbis had something like this for their theology, but they didn't talk about it when they were playing Judge Judy, because it didn't have a place. So who would like to read really loudly? David, you have a great voice. You're loud. I mean, in a good way.
Starting with when the infinite?
Yeah.
When the infinite, divine flowing energy wished to create this material universe, it withdrew its presence. At first, Ein Sof, infinity, filled everything. Now still, even an inanimate stone is energized by it. Otherwise, the stone could not exist at all. It would disintegrate. The energy of Ein Sof clothes itself in garment upon garment. At the beginning of creation, when Ein Sof withdrew its presence all around in every direction, it left a vacuum, empty space, in the middle, surrounded on all sides by the energy of Ein Sof, empty there in the middle. The energy withdrew like water in a pond displaced by a stone. When a stone is dropped in a pond, the water at that spot does not disappear. It merges with the rest. So the withdrawn energy merged with the rest. In the middle remained a pocket of vacuum. Then, one frequency of the divine energy, like a drop in the ocean, was extracted. Descending into the vacuum, it transformed into a mass of shapeless matter, Hebrew, golem, surrounded in every direction by the energy of Ein Sof. Out of this mass came energized matter, for in its simple desire to realize its intention, the divine energy of Ein Sof re-energized the matter with a ray of the energy which had been withdrawn. Not all of the energy, because if it had all returned to the original state, would have been restored, which was not the intention. To fashion pottery, the potter takes an unformed mass of clay and then puts his hand inside the mass to shape it. So the divine flow put its hand into the shapeless mass of matter. That is, a ray of energy returned into it. As this energy began to enter the mass, vessels were formed which were combinations of matter and divine energy. The first vessel, Keter, could contain the energy, but almost immediately the other vessels, not having Keter's capacity, started to break. As the ray of energy continued to enter the vessels, they exploded, shattering. Their spiritual essence, the energy, ascended back to the mother's womb, while the shattered vessels became our universe. Still today, our universe requires the inflow of divine energy. Even though the energy can never exist in its pure form in our universe of matter. It's like when you sit in the shade. Though the sun does not shine on you directly, it illuminates the shaded area. Otherwise, all would be dark. Just like this, the energy of Ein Sof illuminates the world of creation indirectly. Without it, we could not all exist at all.
So look what the rabbis just did there. Which is, you could say, Rabbi, enough with the energy talk. I looked at chapter 2 of Bereshit, and it said, God came walking in the garden, and God wanted to create Adam, you know, that thing that I don't believe in. And God scooped up a bunch of clay, some Adamah, and blew in some breath, you know, so God's obviously got a face and a body, and blew in that nefesh, and that clay golem creature, that's where we get the golem, the clay Frankenstein golem, it came alive, and that's Adam. And this energy stuff, whatever, you're not reading the Torah that I'm reading. And so look what they did with it. They said, wait a second, where did all this matter come from? If maybe everything started with the infinite, if before there was creation, the only thing there was God. Because you can't say there was empty space. Empty space is part of the cosmos, right? So you can't say, well, before there was our universe, there was empty space, because empty space is, that's empty space, that's part of the cosmos. So the only thing that existed was God. So everything must be created out of God. But how do you create something finite? How does something infinite? There's no logic. How do you make that logical connection, which is what my theoretical physicist friends work on, right? It's the origin of calculus, it's the origin of astrophysics, it's the origin of superstring theory. How do you get something? And then they said, it's in chapter 2. Chapter 2 is about how did you get this matter out of God energy? And so they have this idea, infinite energy. You can't imagine it, it's not imaginable, but an infinite field of energy, the only way to get something finite in it is God had to make something that wasn't God. So in the middle of it, whatever that middle is, there is no middle in infinity. There was some space created, and the rabbis in other texts call it a womb, right? This act of creation, the act is an act of birthing. So how did God birth the universe? God was everything, and it was this energy, it was this divine energy. There's a womb that forms, something that is not God inside of God, and through sometimes they call it a shloshah, a chain, sometimes they call it a ladder, sometimes they call it a water pipe. You and I call it an umbilical cord. Through this cord, God starts pumping in stuff. But what happens if God pumps in too much of God energy? It says God could not enter all of the energy back in because it would just fill up. You'd have nothing but infinite energy again. It would be a failure. So God starts with frequencies of God, whatever that is, and matter begins to form. So this matter, this clay, is not a Frankenstein golem. Golem is a reference to what you and I would call like astrophysics, cosmology. It's matter. It's the creation of matter out of energy, and as they said, but still you have this problem, which is infinite energy cannot be contained in finite anything, and it explodes. And in a big bang, the universe is formed. One thing that you know sometimes that when I'm singing the morning service, both in the Kiddushah, there's a quote from Yehezkel, and it's also in the beginning part of Shachari, we go, the angels are singing, God, you created the universe, Berash Gadol. And sometimes I sing it in English. In one big bang, it's a Rash Gadol. It's a gigantic sound. And so the idea is the universe, infinite energy, in one infinitely, by the way, if you're infinitely dimensional, then you might as well just talk it like one tiny point, it explodes, we live in the explosion. Now the only difference they have is that math isn't just Newtonian math for the rabbis. There are other ways to get at the energy and to appreciate that it's everywhere. So then, why don't you read the bottom paragraph? Yeah, is there another paragraph on that page?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll jump ahead. We'll jump forward. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Traces of energy adhere to the shards of the shattered vessels. This may be compared to a clay vessel full of oil. If it breaks and the oil spills out, a bit of the liquid will adhere to the shards in the form of drops. Likewise, in our case, a few sparks of divine energy adhered. When the shards descended into the world of creation, they became matter, like fire and air and earth and water, from which evolved mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. When these materialized, some of the sparks remain hidden within these different forms of existence. You should aim to raise these sparks hidden within the world, manipulating and elevating them to the level of holiness using the power of your soul.
Okay, so now we have your soul. What is your soul? It's a node on the energy grid. There's a part of you that's connected to everything else. And this is also it's probably part of your spirituality, and certainly part of mine, which is that since the rabbis are begging for us to get beyond what we can see, right? Don't believe that the universe is just tables and chairs and separate people walking around in their own skins of water, right? Really like little balloons, water balloons of ocean walking around with some stuff in them. From the perspective of this, the multi-dimensional perspective, I can be connected right now to a child in Africa. I can be connected right now to my mom in Massachusetts. We're all nodes on like an electric grid that goes beyond like, well, that's really far away. There's no really far away when you're talking about this kind of scale of energy. We could be connected through time. God exists beyond time in many ways. So the way your neshama, your soul, is kind of like a spark of energy or your little point on a massive energy grid. And so you're connected to everyone and everything. And so what you do yourself can actually affect others. Now we're like the realm of the invisible. You know, the way, we know that the air I'm breathing out, you could be breathing in. I did brush my teeth, so feel free. But we really are on a planet where we share each other's air. The air I breathe out, that carbon dioxide, could easily be breathed in by a bird in Africa. I mean, so like we're really part of one system, we're all interconnected, but our neshama connects us to that grid. So now it's like, okay, Rabbi, I've been talking very abstractly. So I want you to get back to the Torah idea. Practically speaking, what does it mean to read Torah and to try to live your life according to the underlying structure of things? So I'll go back to the rabbis, and I'll use an example I've used before because it's an example they use a lot. They have a picture of the energy grid. I wonder if I have a bigger one, but this is the one I have out. I have extra copies. But they try to create a picture of the energy grid, and you've probably seen it before, and it is what they call 10 spheres. There's a lot of debate over the word, whether it's sphere or dot or sapphire or something else. But basically, I've always thought they just took the word sphere from the Greeks because it makes a lot of sense. It's probably a play on word. They're probably playing on the word sphere when they say sphera, but they also are playing on the word for gem. There's a reason for that. So now I said it, I'm committed. Here we go. The reason for that is this. Some people have said to me, and they're right to say it, don't kid it. I came into that bar mitzvah, and you talk about this energy stuff and the Big Bang, and there's no way they knew any of that stuff. The world's made up of energy. It's a modern concept. You're anachronistically reading it back to the rabbis. All of these texts must be about something else. How could they possibly have known any of this? So the word sphera, the word for what they call the spheres of energy, they had a prism. I know some of you have heard this before. It's true. They knew what a prism was. And a prism, they knew that, wait a second, if I take a piece of glass of a certain kind, and I hold it up to what looks like absolutely clear light, it breaks into rainbows of energy. From that alone, in an era when people thought the world was flat, and the rest of the world wasn't even teaching people how to read, they concluded that don't believe that this table is really orange. Don't believe that, these pants are, I'm colorblind, or whatever they are, branch. According to doctors, these are branched. Just make sure. You don't know. Everything could be things that look clear. Clear air. Clear stuff could actually be made up of stuff you can't see. Because clear light is clearly made up of different colors that we don't see. The Kabbalists and the rabbis often use water metaphors. There are tons of texts that use, they say it's like, there's a clear, the energy is like a clear water that makes up everything, but it's like they're going through glass pipes of different colors. And so you see and you're like, that's blue. That's a blue water. It's not a blue water. It's actually made up of the God energy beneath it, but the frequency that's coming off is blue. Basically, I'll go back to it. There are different ways the energy manifests. So one of the two that they talk about the most is this. If my goal by living a spiritual, religious, Jewish life, a good life, a life, let's get rid of the religious metaphors. Just a life in tune with the order of the universe. The way that, with what I call natural law. Now I understand marriage is not about heterosexual procreation, like some of the Supreme Court justices are hung up on. So obviously, if you're not going to have children, you can't possibly have marriage. I mean, it's all bizarre. Like once I understand more of how marriage is reflecting a true order of the universe, and that teaches me what marriage is. How are we in tune with that universe? They say, look, every time you walk into a room, right? Pretend that you had God glasses, like that these are like prisms or something, this special glass. And I can put them on, and I actually see the energy field, something like an energy field beneath the surface. So let's say that Mila had a terrible day this morning, right? But I see Mila sitting there and smiling. I don't see anything like that. But if I put on my God glasses and I'm seeing the energies beneath, I see a green energy. And this green energy means that I see that she's heartsick this morning. That there's something about her connection to that energy grid, it ain't right. And because it's green, I know what she needs from me. She needs some yellow. Or she needs some red, or she needs some blue. Right? So like, the God glasses let me see what's going on beneath the surface. Then I can know how to repair it. I can know how to do tikkun olam. So there is an issue here, which is the ethics of how to live comes from the situation. Because the situation can demand a different thing. So let's talk about two of the main balances of the energies that Torah represents. And what the stories of the Torah, studying Torah is meant to get us to. A receptivity, which is really a pun on the word Kabbalah. Kabbalah means to receive. And if you look it up on Wikipedia, I imagine, or you go and take it at a university, the professor will be like, it's called Kabbalah because it was passed from rabbi to guru, rabbi to disciple, and so they received it from their master. It means that, but it means a lot more. It means you become a person who receives, who is receptive, so that you can see with God glasses. So if I am meant in every situation to bring the energies into balance, then one hand is, two of the main, in most situations, you are being called, even though there are 10 spheres, there are 10 frequencies of energy, there are two in particular that are most frequently out of balance, that your job in life is to figure out how to bring into balance. At work, at home, in your relationships with your children, and just with your reya, with your neighbor, with the person, whoever person walked into that room, who's standing next to you in the checkout line, who's sitting next to you in the library, who walked in as your customer or client. So with all other people, and that is givurah or deen, which is structure and accountability. And the other is chesed, which is, it's a forgiving love. It's a forgiving love. Opposite of accountability. So in many ways the opposite. Famous story from, I don't know if it's in the Talmud, I think it's just Hasidic. The rabbi's sitting there, people coming in on Thursday night to find out, have questions for Shabbos. And the Rebbe's sitting there, and a person comes through into the Rebbe's study. And she brings a chicken. And she says to the Rebbe, I got the chicken on discount and clearance. Is it kosher enough? Is it kosher enough for Shabbos? And the Rebbe says, this is very complicated. Let me get out my monocle and my binoculars. I'm going to do an examination. While I'm examining it, you probably know the story. It's a very important story. I mean, it's one of the biggies. The Rebbe examines it and says, so while I'm examining, let me ask you, so how's your husband? How's your family? How's the business? And she says, it's been terrible. We had to close the store. We had no customers. Walmart opened up, or whatever it is. And we got nobody. My husband's been out of work. And why do you think I bought a chicken on discount? And I don't usually go to that seller because they, I wanted to have something for Shabbos. He said, oh, you know what? I'm going to say a special bracha, a special prayer for your family on Shabbos. And the woman says, thank you. And, and the chicken's fine. You know what the story's going. Next person in line comes into the rabbi's study, the door closes, the rabbi's shamash is there, or deputy, or whatever, or secretary. And shows him, I bought this chicken, checking to see if it's kosher enough to make chicken for Shabbos, got it on discount, wasn't quite sure. Of course, let me examine it. It takes a little bit of time. I've got to look all over for blemishes. How's your husband? How's the business? What do you think she says? Things are actually going pretty well. We have a good, and my daughter's going to get married, and the guy's the son of the mayor. Things are looking up. We've got to get extra. I'm saving because we've got to have extra money for the wedding, but things are really looking good. The rabbi says, that's great, that's great. Uh-oh, caught a lesion on here. It's no good. Why don't you give this to someone else? Give it to your non-Jewish neighbor or friend, and you got to get another chick. And it's the same chick. I mean, it's the same. So the question is, how can Jewish law work so inconsistently? The Rebbe sees through God. And he sees this person, and the Kabbalists do talk this way in the Zohar and elsewhere. The woman's coming in with a certain kind of energy, and it's a broken heart energy. And what the first woman needs, this one, chesed, a forgiving love. Forget the law on this one, exactly. The law can be bent. She doesn't need, you know what? You don't get to save money when it comes on, to buying a chick. Like, and just so you can buy a new dress or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, that's not going to be the way to live. She's going to get chesed. She's going to get forgiving, love, a healing energy. But the other woman, she's got to get the law. If we don't have law, we don't have any balance in the universe. If we don't have structure. So that in that case, it's like, you know what? The chicken's not kosher. And you've got to reorient your priorities around the structure by which we live. This comes up all the time. I took my 89-year-old father-in-law to the DMV. I had to get an appointment 3 months in advance for him to get an ID card. He doesn't drive anymore. And guess what? I put in my calendar wrong. I thought it was on Wednesday. She said you were down for Tuesday. Basically, she said you're not on my list. There were about 200 people in line. The line went all the way to the Poway one into the parking lot and around. It was hot. She had every right. So she's looking at me. She's looking at Russ. She had every right to go for Gevurim. She had every right to say, is this really fair? I'm going to put you in front of 200 people, families, disabled people, children. She's got a decision to make. Or do I go for this, which is, I believe this guy is trying to help out his father-in-law. I have the eyes to see he's not lying. And so, you know me. I said to her, I'm mortified that you don't have, I was like, it's on my calendar for today. I made this appointment 3 months ago on the internet. But you know what? It kind of makes sense to me. I'm here on a Wednesday, and Tuesday's my day off. I bet it was yesterday. I said, do you have the list for yesterday? She said, no. I said, I blew it. We'll leave. Because it's crazy. I'm already overwhelmed. I'm already having anxiety disorder. And so I'm like, no problem. We'll leave. We'll not get, And she said, no, it's okay. Just go to Blue too. So she's got, we're in that position every moment of our lives. So forget the other 8 Sfirot right now. We're constantly, what Torah is we're studying it, we're talking about it, I'm sitting there with Shane, on Sundays, we're trying to figure out, your daughter's like this, my daughter's like this, and we're reading the story of Isaac, and it's talking about bullying, and you're like, how do you, what are we going to teach our kids about bullying, and what do they need to hear from us, and maybe, like Torah study is trying to figure out how we develop this sensitivity to seeing the world through God's eyes, and to see the underlying structure of it, and to know how to act in each moment. In this moment, does my child need, it could be anyone, it's not a child, it's the DMV. Does my child need to, Daddy, we're not going to go, I can't go to the fireworks until we, play another game of Monopoly, dinosaur Monopoly, right? And I'm like, no, we got to go now. Or we'll miss stuff. How do I know when to say, Mirav, there's a structure, and you got to learn to fit in that structure, or you're going to fail nursery school, right? And I've done this. Mirav needs a lot of sensitivity. She'll cry for an hour. She'll cry because, number one, I told her that she's like OCD or whatever. Maybe all kids are. I don't know. She's got this thing. She had a sequence. She's completely concrete sequential. If she doesn't do A before she does B, she can't do anything. She'll sit in a corner for an hour. So number one, I broke her sequence. And number two, she's shamed. Mirav is so sensitive. If I say something like, if I just have a word like, I made this macaroni and cheese for you, and now you're not eating it, it really hurts my feelings, she'll start crying. And she's not crying, because she'll run to her mommy, she's not crying because I'm making her eat macaroni and cheese. I'm a bad girl, I'm a bad girl. Right? So the question is, I'm reading books on how to parent, because I believe there's a Torah of parenting. But it doesn't mean I read a book that says, Super Nanny says, tell your child this. Maybe Super Nanny says, here's some tools, A, B, C. I got to know which A, B, or C I'm going to use in that moment. I got to know it every time. Every time you and I, any of you and I have a conversation, right? I can't just be, Judaism says this. Because maybe your chicken's kosher and maybe it's not. Right? Now, it doesn't mean that there's no structure at all. If you don't have any account, so maybe Mirav needs extra of the chesed. But I'm still worried that she's going to start nursery school and she's never been in classes. I got to start her in a few weeks. It could be that she's going to completely flunk that first day and be sitting in the corner crying because the teacher said you didn't line up right. Because she just had to take off her coat first and put it on the hook, and she didn't get it off in time. Or her glasses are dirty and she can't do anything until her glasses are clean. So we're all balancing the energies of structure and accountability, law, order, And exceptions to the rule, mercy, love, forgiveness. And they're like, if you can just develop a sensitivity to, is this person, and to put it crudely, is this person walking in with the red energy? Is this person walking in with the blue energy? And so how can I help that energy to get into the balanced state? That's a lot of what we're trying to develop. So God actually is, they could say, look, is God separate from all of us? Sure. Our universe could go away and there'd still be God. But the God that's in the words of the Torah is the God of the underlying structure, and it's the God that's passing through each of our souls. Our soul is a piece of God. We're all interconnected. We're all of different frequencies and light, and we're trying to get in balance. And that's essentially the way the rabbis, most of them, many of them, half of them, understood their theology. The problem was this, and I think it was a big problem. They didn't tell a lot of people until basically Tzvat in the 1500s, 1600s. They decided that you know what you should, and it's demeaning in a way. Their attitude was kind of like this. You go into shul and you tell people to be a mensch. You tell people to be a good person. You tell them to keep kashrut in the holidays and mitzvot. And if you do Torah study, you give a Rashi or two. But what the rabbis do among themselves, that's your Aristotle, your Heraclitus, your Plato and Socrates. But you don't go in and preach that to the masses. You preach to the masses, put money in the tzedakah box, light your Shabbos candles, bless your kids, give to the poor, have an open hand. And that really was great for 2,000 years. The problem is I think we need more than that. Right? I think that especially, you can't have theoretical physics and evolution on the one hand and have the rabbis hiding this stuff on the other. So the thing is that, people say, oh, Kabbalah is a cultish thing, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't. I mean, and this is the way they're reading Torah and getting into it. So it's 10 minutes to 12. I put a lot on the table. I'm going to review it in 5 seconds and ask you any comments or questions. I know it was a lecture day more than a Torah study discussion today, and it's probably because we started late. But we have the rabbis instituting the idea that God resides in the text. We have the idea that the Torah is not just a literal book of words that were stenographically written down by Moses, but somehow they are an energy. They are an energy that leads the way to seeing the energies that make up the world and how they do that we're trying to understand the structure of the universe, the structure of parenting, the structure of friendship, the structure of business ethics. We're very geared as Jews to the situation, right? It's very hard to have a slogan that fits it all. One of the reasons, I hope not, I got very mixed feelings about interfaith gatherings because almost always an interfaith gathering ends with someone getting on the microphone and saying, I think I really see the common denominator here. Practice the golden rule. If I'm supposed to do for Rivka what she needs today, I'd be like, well, what would I want if I were Rivka? But I'm not Rivka. Right? A Jew says, you got to look at Rivka. You got to talk to Rivka. You got to ask Rivka. You know what I mean? Like I didn't solve anything by saying do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or something like that. Because who are you? I got to know you. I got to see you. How does God see you? How does Torah see you? What's the Torah running through you? Actually, you know what Hillel's famous comment about that is, in response kind of like to the New Testament? Love thy neighbor as yourself is in Leviticus, in the Holiness Code. But Hillel said, instead of doing unto others as you would want them to do unto you, try this instead. Don't do unto others what you wouldn't want them to do to you. And you'll probably end up in a holier place. Because if you don't want people knocking on your door to save your soul, don't knock on their door to save their soul. But if you're like, well, I'm a Christian with a Christian soul that wants to go to heaven, I better make everyone into Christian souls to get into heaven. Right? That's loving. That means I don't care who Rivka really is. Because I'm loving her like I want to be loved. I want to go to heaven. So I'll just preach you about what my latest thing is. And I don't care that I bothered you at home and knocked on your door. It's a situational approach. And we study the situations in Torah. And we hear 100 different ways to look at this situation. Did Isaac do the right thing? Did he do the wrong thing? Why did this happen? Why is this there? Why is this story repeated? Why is the storyteller now telling a slightly different version of it? Is that supposed to be the one that is what energy is that storyteller using? What energy is the storyteller here in Exodus using? So that's the way it kind of goes. Any comments or questions? God and Torah, day one. Lord.
I didn't quite get the concept about
published, just a group of rabbis who were like a group of rabbis who taught themselves or taught each other these ideas. Kabbalah starts probably before even the Pharisees, and they were a group of people who read Ezekiel, and they read Ezekiel having all of these visions of God. There are these colors in the sky, and there's a train of God, a chariot of God going by. And we've got Jacob in the Torah saying, oh my God, the angels are going up and down the ladder to heaven right now. And I didn't even know. Like, thank God, like I had this dream, or I didn't have a dream. I opened my eyes and I saw what's going on around us all the time. So they're like, wait a second. It's right there in the Torah, and it's right there in the Tanakh, that there are these things going on around us all the time that we don't see. And they wanted to have those visions. And they studied sometimes Gnosticism or Greek philosophy. And so in the Mishnah, what it says is that the Mishnah is the earliest layer of the Talmud. It's published in 200 CE, and covers the period roughly from 200 BCE to 200 CE. The Roman domination, the formation of the rabbis, the portable Judaism, the writing of how you live it wherever. And the Mishnah says this: an awful lot of rabbis are spending their time trying to meditate their way into unifying with God. That's where you get in the Mishnah. They say things like they have seen a throne of God, and behind and there are four angels. There's Raphi behind him, which is true in the sanctuary, and you got Michael and Uriel and Gabriel, and then other Kabbalists are saying, oh, everything. Other rabbis. So there are these rabbis. The top rabbis in the academies are through prayer or meditation. There's no service yet as we know it. There's no services yet as we know it. That they're somehow meditating or contemplating is what they call it, to see what Ezekiel saw, to see what Jacob saw. And then then the Mishnah says you're forbidden from doing it. So they say you're forbidden from trying to, it's hard to say, from doing this contemplation. At the very least, it's forbidden to do alone. You have to at least have multiple people, especially two. At the origin, and you have to study Torah with two people. You shouldn't be studying all by yourself. You can study some Torah all by yourself, but you should at least have two, because you're creating something real and you're not just going off down in your own thing. So we know that this kind of idea that there's a reality going on around us was already in Mishnah, that they talk about outlawing it, but it's typical Jewish. They're like, don't do it, because everybody's doing it. You know, and they're like, don't do it, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Meir did. And you're like, but I thought you're telling me I'm supposed to be like Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Akiva. Yeah, but don't do that one. You know what I mean? So it's a mixed message, because you're like, well, they're trying to connect with God, they're trying to see what God is, but then, yeah, you're no Rabbi Akiva. So quit it. That developed into, you just keep it among the rabbis. You don't teach it to others. And there are books even from, look, there's one theory, I think it's right, which is there was no liturgy yet. And some people asked, why is, before the prayer book in a sense was written, the early service was very, very, very short, according to the Mishnah. It was only, probably an hour. I mean, well, that's what the Torah reading. The actual service was very, very brief. And it's recorded in the Mishnah what the parts were. And then, so it was basically like Baruch She'amar, and you do a Baruch, and you had Shema, and then you had Amidah. And the Amidah was completely silent. There was no repetition. And originally there wasn't a liturgy for it. So some scholars say, actually, at the core of our service 3 times a day, you have the ancient practice of trying to connect to God wordlessly and silently through meditation within every service. But it's been made safe and domesticated because the rabbi says, just read the English or the Hebrew on the pages, because we don't actually try to see the invisible anymore. But the idea was, so how it goes back at least to the time following Ezekiel, at least to the time of the Mishnah, but then it wasn't published in this form until like the 1500s, because it was kept among the rabbis to follow the dictate that these ideas are better kept for people who can handle it. That's the answer. So the Kabbalists, in a sense, you could say that early on, I don't know, maybe they were 10% of the rabbis in the Mishnah, maybe more. We don't know exactly, because we don't know exactly how many were doing it. And then you could say later on it was maybe 50% of the rabbis. But what I'm really telling you is that in the university, if you took a course in 1988 in Kabbalah, the answer is, well, there was some Kabbalah in Italy and in Spain and in Israel, and then you studied it 10 years later. Actually, Kabbalah was also in France, and it was over here, and it was in Turkey, and it was there, and it was in Egypt, and then you study 5 years later, and like, actually, Kabbalah was kind of everywhere, because it was kind of like the rabbi's theology. So that's where we think of it less as, that's what I think of it. I think of it as a theology. Now, you can be a great Jew without a theology. I think probably most great Jews probably don't have any theology whatsoever, right? I light Shabbos candles, I give tzedakah, I open my hand to the poor, I may not get Torah study, but I go on holidays, I hit my yard sites, and they're good people, and I do funerals for them, and when you read Aisha Chayo, you cry, because it's right. It's like, she'll marry the poor, she always had a kind word, they're amazing people. But they went through life without theology. They didn't say, what is this God thing we're talking about? Is the Torah from outside? What does that mean? But then why aren't we doing sacrifices anymore? Because it's not about sacrifice. So but they're like, I can live without it. So like most people, you don't have to have a theology to be Jewish. You can be a very good atheist Jew. It's the old thing. The story is told a million different ways, sometimes with Buddhists, but it certainly was at least once in Israel told in connection with Rav Kook, which is, someone said, what are we going to do with all these Jews who are heretics? And they said, who do you think's helping the poor so much? If there's no life after this, then you might as well help the poor schmucks who are living in this world because there's nothing coming up. So thank God for that. Look at Rav Kook in Israel. He was Kabbalist, and he was religious, and he was Haredi, and people said to him, oh my God, how can we live in this land in 1920, 1930, 1940, when you got these socialist kids and the girls sleeping with the girls, and they're eliminating marriage, and they're eating pork and stuff. And, Rav Kook was like, what do you think's building the planet? Do you want to go out there? You want to take off your wool coat for a second and, drain the swamps? We're all doing our part. So, you don't need a theology to be a great Jew and to be part of God's plan. So, but it was really that. Any other comments or questions? I know you say this. I'm sensitive about the fact that I know some people like Torah study because it is highly interactive, and I know today was lecture. I know, but that's part of. I wanted a little freedom in the summer series to do that. But next time is coming up Avodah. Now, I want to look at them. What are prayers? What are services? And what does it mean to do worship? And what are the holidays? So next time, I'm going to throw out to you, what is this holiday of Shavuot? What is this holiday of Sukkot? What does it mean to be an adult who takes this stuff seriously and who really wants to live it right? Why are we living in a sukkah? Why are we blowing a shofar? Why are we fasting on Yom Kippur? And it'll be more interactive. I imagine I'll lose half of you, so that's fine. God bless you for coming to the first one. And we might be back in the study, but then it'll be more interactive, and I'll ask you, when you keep the holiday, what do you think when you sit in a sukkah? What do you think when you go? What's your experience of high holidays? And let me give you a little idea of what Rosh Hashanah is supposed to be, and let's figure out what is it to you. So it'll automatically become more interactive since we're talking about prayers and holidays, right?
Will you give